Hello everybody, this is Pat
And I'm Heidi.
from Rain Country Homestead, and
God is good
all the
all
time.
the time.
And so today we wanted to talk about self-sufficiency. And it's not free.
But it's liberating.
That's correct, and that's why we do it. We like to incorporate new technologies with old technologies in order to help augment our time. Because there is a trade-off when you're saving money. Let's say, okay, well, I don't have to go to the store and buy milk, or I don't have to go to the store and buy beef, or I don't have to go to the store and buy
Eggs,
produce.
produce, yeah.
I don't have to outsource and, pay for a contractor to come in and do whatever. All these things, there's a trade-off. And one of those trade-offs, you're going to trade time for money. And that's the basics. Now you guys can just shut the video off and go away.
Or not.
But if you're interested in kind of understanding a little bit more, I mean, the people that follow our channels are, seasoned homesteaders, but we have a lot of folks that are newcomers to the channel who are interested in a self-sufficient lifestyle. And we would like to think that we're kind of helping to help them along as some of you guys have helped us along and are helping us along by responding to our comments and some folks that we've talked to on the phone and such. And just, there's a couple of things that we want to go over that will kind of help hopefully charge you guys with the ambition and drive to continue that strive for self-sufficiency. And so what do we mean by it's not free? Self-sufficiency isn't free. The homesteading movement isn't free. Well, if you're not, going out to the restaurant to eat, or you're doing things yourself, well, you're trading your time for the money it might take for a professional to do that same project or provide you that service. So, Mrs. Rain, want to add to that?
Well, yeah, it's there's a lot of work involved. For those of you who are new, some people still, been following us for a while and they think we have several acres of land. We are just on a 3rd-acre corner lot in a neighborhood. We live in a small remote town, which is really nice, and I love that aspect, but we have yet to invest in that chunk of land. Some of it's hard to give up what we have here and what we've already built here, but also it's finding that perfect piece of land where we can still be close to our kids. So there's a brief history, but we're making the most of what we do right here in our little neighborhood and in our little lot, growing as much food as we can. And we have chickens. We don't have any other livestock other than the chickens, if they can even be considered livestock, but they are alive and they're stock.
So we got to stock them, yeah.
But anyway, there's still, even in our little small area, and what we're doing just, here and being as off-grid as we can, there's time and money, there's money invested in what we have, and there's lots and lots of time. It is hard work, and I sometimes wonder if we ever got that acres and acres of land. With how busy I am and how much time goes into just what we're doing here, I wonder how I'd be able to handle several acres of land. But whatever, I mean, it would still be nice to have for the sake of privacy.
You're still doing the same things. I mean, you still have structures to maintain.
Right.
You still have your garden to maintain. You still have firewood to get in. You still have repairs and cooking and cleaning and all those things that go along with whether or not you got 1,000 acres or you got a third of an acre.
True.
All those
and cooking
things
and
are
baking
still
from scratch is still going to be the same no matter how much acreage you have.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I'm thinking if we ever got to the point we had more acreage where we could have more garden and more animals if we decided to go that route. I mean, that's what I'm talking about mostly. I mean, it's like, how would we keep up on all of that if I, with the time? But, you know, you balance things out, and that's part of it too, is you have to find out what works for you too, in your abilities, in your, what is in your area, you know, what are you physically able to handle? Some people are disabled. There's a channel out there called Bumblebee Junction, and they're both disabled and they're veterans, and yet, you know, they do quite a bit with what they have, and that's a part of it. You learn how to work around. I mean, some people may not be able to physically do some of the things I do, but they might do other things that I don't, and so that makes us all very individual, and finding the best way for you is what's best for you, not the way we do it, not the way some other channel does it, or some homesteader that may just live right down the road from you. It's what works best for you. And so what we hope is, in our channel as a whole, that we can just give you some more ideas of things you can do to become more self-sufficient and thus liberate yourself more. But we're also trying to approach this with this video on the more realistic aspect of, sometimes you hear a thing about, oh, when you're off grid, you have free power. Well, that's not actually true. You may be disconnected from the grid and not be owned by a company, which is where it's liberating, but it's not free.
Yeah, you become the company.
Yes.
You become the lineman, you become the electrician, you become all these different things. The more you draw yourself away from, I was going to say society, but draw away from outsourcing, the more responsible you become, the more dependent on yourself you become, the more dependent on internal knowledge and knowledge off of each other.
And
you have to be able to
skills.
complement each other
Right.
on their skills, and some of them skills overlap. Believe it or not, I can cook. I'd be cooking in grease, but I can cook. And Heidi can do, woodworking things or
little
whatever,
bit.
a little bit.
I've built
I just don't want to give her a
box
hammer or
before.
anything sharp to use.
It just wasn't as pretty as Mr. Rain makes.
I always say this tongue in cheek, but you kind of get the idea. You have to work together. And our channel, we try to promote old school ways and new technology in order to augment or help you with some of the self-sufficiency things like solar, water collection, water purification. You have to think about those things and how much time you have to incorporate that into your daily schedule. Well, for a lot of us, we have the ability just to turn on the tap. Water comes out. If you rent, well, if you have a break underneath the sink, well, you just call up the landlord and say, hey, I got a problem. You might even go as far as to shut it off for the landlord and leave him go to work. But for people who are trying to become more and more and more independent, the more and more and more you have to learn those skills, incorporate those skills, so that takes time and effort, a little less and less money all the time, but more and more of your time and more of your skills. So that's kind of what this video is about, is to share with you, if you're thinking about getting into homesteading or self-sufficiency or independence, then there's a cost benefit to that, but there's also a cost of your time. So
Right.
Homesteading, by definition, is just somebody who has a home and that's where they reside. But a lot of us have a different definition of homesteading. Some of us are thinking about, homesteading is, coming across on a covered wagon, and not having much to work with and ended up in the middle of nowhere and making things out of hand tools. Well, if that's your definition of homesteading, so be it, but that's not Webster's definition of homesteading. Whatever your definition is, I think we can all agree that when it comes to homesteading and self-sufficiency and independence, if we kind of meld all that together, I think we all have to realize that, yeah, there is a there is a cost, but it might not be in monetary value, but within a skill set and within a time set or time frame. So that's why we try to incorporate some of the modern technologies and the old technologies, and also give you understanding you can live without the modern technologies. You know,
Right.
people did it for thousands of years,
Yeah.
so it is possible. It's a good idea to hone those skills and to make that dream a reality if you really want it.
Aside from just the education and the work, there are also monetary costs involved. You know, there are ways that you can get around some of those monetary costs, and some of that is bartering. You know, we talked about that in another video about, how to save money on groceries, for example, is bartering maybe your goat's milk for somebody else's cabbage that you have a problem growing, or whatever it is. Or your goat's milk for somebody else's skills, or a skill for a skill. I mean, I don't think we could ever fully be self-sufficient. There's that saying, no man's an island. We all kind of need each other to an extent, but when we talk about self-sufficiency in this type of lifestyle, we're talking more of being free from having big corporations own us in some way. We are currently still on public power, but we have the freedom now, we're to a point, we have the freedom, we can have them come shut it off. And we have enough, I have my treadle sewing machine. I don't need any electricity, solar or otherwise, to run that. I just need the power of my legs to do that. But again, that's work. That's an investment of my work to do that. We have an off-grid laundry setup that Mr. Rain built, and that we have in case our electric washing machine ever just goes toe up and we can't use it at all. Or maybe we have an issue with the solar power, it's middle of winter and it's been dark and cloudy for days on end, and we have not been able to collect enough solar power to keep it running. And maybe we don't have public power to fall back on. We've got the off-grid setup that we can use. But that's, of course, work. And so you got to find out what ways are going to be best for you, and figure out what you want to invest your time and your finances in. So as with the off-grid laundry setup that we have, and I have a video on that, I'll go ahead and link to up here so you can see what it looks like. But there was an investment in the galvanized tubs, and investment of Mr. Rain's time, and putting the holes in there and making the frame to hold the tubs, and to buy the wringer. But now we own it, it's ours, and if we ever need it to fall back on, it's there. And I've used it many times, it's a great setup. But when I have to fall back on that, that's gonna be work. But it's worth it to me knowing I have the freedom to do that I do not have to be dependent on the public power. And I don't even have to be dependent on the solar power, because you never know what can happen with that. Anything can go wrong. And so, speaking of solar power, now there's something, it's not free energy. It costs it costs money to get it set up. There can be, depending, like if you live in a place like we do with few sunny days, you're gonna have to put a little more money into your solar setup to get all the solar panels you need to collect the amount of power you need to run what you've got going on. But it's also gonna be tailored to, what all you have going on. Some people can run off very little power. Now you can look at people like Doug and Stacy they're completely off-grid. They don't run any electricity other than the generator occasionally. But still, what comes with that? If you're going completely off-grid and no solar power at all, that means you're gonna have to put more time and more work into doing what you're doing. Again, it's gotta be tailored to your needs, your physical abilities, but regardless, it's still something, it's still an investment in one way or the other. And yet, as I said before, it's still very liberating, because then at that point, whether it be solar power, generator, or whatever it is, it's something that you own. It's not someone that owns you.
Right. At least so far.
Right.
And that's the same thing. The the solar power and the laundry is a perfect example of where modern technology couples up with independence. Of course, there's costs involved in that with getting yourself set up, like Mrs. Rain said. You know, these modern technologies, what they're supposed to do is help with your time management. And same thing with growing your own food, whether it be meat or produce. As anybody who does any growing of these things knows that it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. You know, there's a lot of diseases that you have to deal with. A lot of things that people don't realize. I mean, Mrs. Rain wasn't grown up on a farm or anything like that, but I was raised around horses and growing your own food, and both produce and meat. So I know I have some sort of a idea. Well, although we just have chickens, we don't have room for goats. I know enough about livestock to know that we don't have the room for that here. But there's definitely a cost emotionally, especially if you're harvesting some of that meat. You know, there's the difficulty in harvesting that. And
Well, we have
growing-
some followers that have shared with us before that they raise their own beef, but it's an investment in money and hard work that doesn't, as far as the cost involved, it doesn't necessarily cost less than buying it at the store.
Right.
But what do they have? They have the freedom of being able to raise it themselves, knowing what those animals are eating, knowing how they were treated, and knowing what is going in their bodies when they then turn those animals into food for themselves. I mean, I believe if you have the time and the ability and the space to do it, it's definitely a worthwhile thing to do, but it's not free.
yeah, and sometimes, depending on what kind of issues you run into, if you have to purchase hay and you have to purchase all of these things, you can't grow your own hay and different things, then sometimes the beef costs more to raise, especially if you just have, you're just raising a cow. That can end up costing you more than just going down to the supermarket and paying for half a beef to cut and wrap. If you have a piece of property that you can grow more than one, where you can sell one and keep one, and the more beef that you can raise, the possibilities of actually making a little bit of money from that and being able to pay for your meat will be realized in the benefit of income or breaking even. So.
And I think, for anyone who's just maybe getting started and considering that stuff, any of this, I think really, I mean, and this is just common, most people already know this, is start out with chickens, because chickens are going to be the least amount of work, the least amount of investment involved, I mean, other than building the chicken coop, but once you got it, you got it. And the payoff is pretty big, because not only do you get eggs, you get you get their great fertilizer, you get these natural living rototillers that you can let roam in your garden in the wintertime like we do, and even in the greenhouse this time of year. They love it in there on rainy days because they have a dry place to go hang out and still get a little more light than they would in their coop. And they can get in there and till up my greenhouse and leave some fertilizer behind. I mean, the payoff is just really great. So you just can't, you can't lose with chickens, that's what I have to say. But again, you can deal with diseases, you still got, you still got care and upkeep, and yeah.
Well, the other thing, if you're just getting into this, you got a small space, quail are another great thing to look into.
Right.
Number one, they're quieter, they take up less room, and pound for pound, they'll give you more eggs and meat than a chicken will.
Right. That's just really good points, especially for people who may have, live in neighborhoods with strong restrictions against chickens. Usually you can get away with quail because they're so quiet and take up so much little room that, even if it's technically against the law for you to have the quail, you can usually have those and nobody would be the wiser. But yeah, pound for pound, because you know, you can get the Coturnix, that's the one I've read the most about, quail, because they're great for meat and eggs, and we've still considered doing that. I would someday like to do the quail too. Their eggs are a lot smaller, but
Takes
they
about
lay,
3 eggs to make a,
yeah, but they lay more eggs than your chicken.
yeah.
And then you got a pretty fast turnover of, you know, getting the meat, like kind of like you would with rabbits.
Mhm.
Another thing I wanted to bring up as far as, I think the least amount of cost in getting started would be starting with gardening. Now, I have a video I put out that's, it was focused on tips for small space gardening, but it was also for people even with large spaces who are just getting started into growing their own produce. And I would like to go ahead and link to that right up here and have you check that out, because if you are just getting started, it's a really, that is definitely a must. You know, learn how to start off with some herbs and some easy to grow things like potatoes and beans, or whatever is easy to grow in your area. Obviously our area is great for beans, peas, potatoes, and squash. Those are some really excellent things to start off with, pretty much no matter where you live. But you know, obviously there's going to be different needs depending on whether you're really dry and hot, whether you're wet and moderate like us, or wherever, or you know, you have harsh winters. Those are all going to be different, so you got to look into your own areas. But again, check that video out. But I think as far as cost investment, gardening, I think is probably the lowest cost investment, because you don't have to put a lot of money to get started. You can start with a small little place, you know, you may have to buy some soil to start with, or just start by making your own, you know, doing the layering and all that, getting grass clippings. You can get all kinds of free stuff, you know, throw down some cardboard, put some grass clippings on top of that and whatever, and let it naturally break down, or wood chips. And you know, next year you can have a really great place to plant your stuff, and it doesn't have to cost you any money to do that, and very little work. It's that's usually how I do my gardening when I want a new space. I go out there and lay down cardboard and newspapers. I know there's people worry about the glues and the inks, but you know what? It's free. It's a place to start. Eventually it's all going to break down, and I don't worry as much about that. I pile on the horse manure that we can get for free, grass clippings and leaves, anything that we can get for free. And my potatoes and my zucchini did best in areas like that.
Right.
Rather than areas that we tilled up. The
Mhm.
potatoes did best in those fresh areas like that. So really easy way to start, and with, you know, the least amount of investment in money and in time. And you can have, next year you can have your own beans growing just right outside your door.
Well, I hope this kind of gives the people an idea that, and I think the most of us know this, but it's interesting to think about every so often that,
Right.
yeah, homesteading, self-sufficiency isn't free. It definitely is a trade-off there for time. But is it worth it? Absolutely. Do we
Absolutely.
regret it? Absolutely not.
And the other thing that I just thought of, was just reminded of with what Mr. Rain just said, is that, you know, is it worth it? Yes, because we could either spend our time, both of us, working outside the home at jobs we hate or don't really care for, not getting to see each other for most of the day, and then coming home exhausted, having to buy prepackaged food that's unhealthy, or spending a lot of money going out to eat, which most restaurants don't have the healthiest foods either. And yeah, maybe we're not having to pour into the work into making the foods from scratch or whatever, but to me it's so much happier, so much more fulfilling doing the work ourselves, being able to spend our whole days together if we want or not. You know, he can be in his shop all day and I can be in here sewing skirts all day. Either way, we're here. We can set our own schedule. We don't have to work for somebody else and making, you know, under their schedule and their rules. We make our own rules. We make our own schedule, and we can work at our own pace at our own time. It's so liberating. So anyway,
Well, and just the idea that you don't have to have as much capital to keep going. You get to yourself to a point that you have low or no debt, and the self-sufficiency kind of starts to snowball a little bit, and you're going to find out that you're freer to do the things that you want to do because you have less overhead.
right,
And that is also worth the effort to do the things yourself, learn how to do the things yourself. There's freedom in that independence. There's freedom in the independence of the lack of overhead, and just being able to set your own hours.
Right.
You know,
love it.
yeah,
It's great.
she does things that she loves, and I do the things that I love. And, you know, we don't make money hand over fist, but we're happier, we're freer, and we
And
definitely.
we don't need to make money hand over fist.
No,
'Cause we have low overhead, we're out of debt, and,
Right,
you know, we don't have hospital bills and medical bills and all this kind of stuff, because we're pretty healthy people,
so far.
so far.
We hope that this helps some folks out that are thinking about becoming a little more independent, thinking about homesteading in the terms of getting into your covered wagon and having your oxen tow you across country, or just
Or
hope
living in an
that.
apartment and growing a little garden in
Exactly,
in some pots.
we would think on a third of an acre that, you know, at first we were thinking, well, it's impossible to be able to become independent. But it's really surprising after you learn some skills and after you learn how to make the best use of your space and find out what grows best in your area, that yes, you can do it. Yes, there's freedom in it. Yes, you can do it with less money, if you just learn those skills. And YouTube is a great resource to find out how you can do things on your own. And that's what the content that we're trying to put out here is to help you guys come along in your
Right.
dreams and be able to make that become a reality.
Absolutely. Okay,
Thanks for coming by.
thanks for watching. Take
Take
care,
care, and God bless.